She told a room full of people that I was lucky she kept me around, and they all laughed. Every single one of them. Right before I showed them exactly who they were laughing at. But before we get to that, if you're here for stories where quiet men turn the tables, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and give this video a like. It helps more than you know that I'll never forget the exact moment the insult landed. It was at my wife Lauren's precious realtor networking gala, the kind she treated like the Oscars. You know the type: velvet ropes, cheap champagne pretending to be expensive, and a jazz trio playing like they regretted every life choice that got them there. The place smelled like cologne samples and desperation. I wasn't supposed to be there originally. Lauren insisted at the last minute, claiming it would look good if I showed up. Translation: I existed to complete her picture-perfect image that I walked in wearing my best suit. Simple, tailored, nothing flashy. The kind of suit a man wears when he actually works for a living. Her crowd was a different breed. Men who spent more time styling their hair than checking their investments. Women who dressed like they were auditioning for a reality show. And in the center of it all, Lauren, radiant, confident, absolutely in her element. She barely noticed me at first. She was too busy laughing with her so-called business mentor, a slick-haired charmer named Carter Reeves. Carter was the kind of man who held his wine glass like a prop and smiled like the world owed him applause. I'd heard plenty about him, always from Lauren, always vaguely phrased. "He's helping me grow my career," she'd say. Or, "Carter thinks I should focus on connecting with high-value clients." I never liked how she said his name with that upward lilt, but I kept my mouth shut. That was my thing, silence. It kept the peace. Or so I thought. When she finally did notice me, she gave me the kind of smile people reserve for distant relatives at funerals. "Oh, Mark made it," she said, and everyone turned like she'd introduced a magician's assistant instead of her husband. Then came the introductions, and that was when Carter went in for the kill. "This is the guy who handles your home stuff, right?" he asked, swirling his wine, eyes flicking over me like he was checking a price tag. "Lauren told us you run." What was it again? Something small. I felt a ripple of laughter around us. My jaw tightened, but I didn't flinch. I simply nodded. "I manage a contracting firm." Carter grinned. Right, blue collar. That's adorable. Lauren's the real powerhouse here." The group exploded in laughter, and Lauren, my wife, didn't defend me. She didn't correct him. She didn't even frown. She just placed a hand on his arm like the two of them shared some private joke that I stood there, the noise fading, the lights blurring. And something inside me, something heavy, something old, shifted that I didn't yell, didn't storm out, didn't cause a scene. Instead, I looked right at Carter, then at Lauren, and I simply smiled. A calm, steady smile that made Carter's eyebrows twitch, because while Carter saw a blue-collar husband, he didn't know what my contracting firm actually was. He didn't know that 3 of the developers sponsoring their event tonight were my long-term clients. He didn't know that I'd built half the luxury homes these realtors showed off like trophies. And Lauren, she had no idea what I'd recently signed. A contract big enough to shift the ground she so confidently stood on. But none of them needed to know that. Not yet. The room kept laughing. I just sipped my drink and nodded along. The picture of polite compliance. The quiet man in the background. The harmless husband. The convenient prop. Inside, though, I was memorizing faces. Tones. Reactions. Lauren leaned close to her friends, whispering something. Something that made them all turn toward me with matching smirks. And that was the moment I realized she didn't just tolerate the disrespect. She encouraged it. I finished my drink, set the empty glass on the nearest table, and without a single word, I walked away from the group. No scene. No drama. Just a man stepping back into the shadows everyone assumed he belonged in. They didn't notice me leaving. Why would they? They had no idea the quietest man in the room had just made a decision. And decisions, in my world, always come with consequences. I didn't go home after that gala. I didn't even go to the car right away. I stepped outside into the cool night air and stood under the canopy lights, breathing slowly, feeling something inside me settle. Not anger, not sadness, something steadier, like steel cooling into shape. Cars pulled up and drove off. Couples stumbled out laughing. Clusters of realtors smoked e-cigarettes and compared commissions, but I stayed still. Quiet men can stand still for a long time. When I finally did leave, I drove around aimlessly, the kind of driving where you don't remember the turns, but somehow end up exactly where you needed to be. I pulled into an old gas station, bought a coffee that tasted like rust, and sat in the parking lot while a half-lit sign buzzed overhead. And that's when the pieces started falling into place. Every late-night team meeting, every Saturday client visit, every time she told me I didn't understand how hard she was working to build something real. I'd thought marriage meant supporting her dreams. I hadn't realized she'd rewritten the script and cast me as the naive placeholder. By the time I got home, the house was quiet. She was asleep or pretending to be. I didn't check. I went to my workshop, turned on the dim overhead light, and started sorting through documents. Contracts, invoices, development blueprints, everything connected to my firm. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I was reminding myself of the truth. I wasn't small. I wasn't insignificant. My work built neighborhoods. My clients trusted me with multi-million-dollar projects. People who laughed at men like me still depended on us when their roofs leaked or their foundations cracked. Lauren had forgotten that. Carter had never known it. And that meant they had no idea how precarious their little world actually was. The next morning, Lauren acted like nothing happened. She came downstairs wearing a silk robe, tapping on her phone, sipping her almond milk latte like she was auditioning for some lifestyle blog. "You were quiet last night," she said, not looking up. "Long day," I answered. She hummed. Not an apology, not even curiosity, just a noise. A placeholder gesture for someone who'd stopped caring a long time ago. She didn't ask where I'd gone. Didn't ask what I thought of the gala. Didn't ask how I felt about Carter's little performance. She just grabbed her keys and floated out the door. "Showing a house," she called over her shoulder. I didn't believe that for a second. I spent the day reviewing upcoming deals. 3 developers, Kensington Homes, Willowgate Development, and North River Communities, were preparing to launch a massive joint real estate campaign. Luxury homes, exclusive listings, big commissions. And the listing rights? They were planning to give them to Lauren's agency. Not specifically to Lauren, but she'd been fighting hard for a piece of it. Carter had been leading that charge. And I, without knowing it, was sitting on the lever that propped all of that up. Here's the thing. My contracting firm wasn't just building houses. We were the preferred construction partner for Kensington and Willowgate, and we were negotiating with North River. Meaning, if I so much as sneezed, the entire launch timeline would shift. I learned that because the project manager from Kensington called me at noon, asking if we could adjust our schedule to accommodate the marketing push Carter was coordinating. That call changed my whole day. My whole week, actually. I didn't give him an answer right away. I just said, "I'll review our timeline and get back to you." He thanked me like his life depended on it. I hung up and sat back in my chair. So Carter was publicly belittling me while privately begging for my company's cooperation? Interesting. Very interesting. Lauren got home late that night. Much later than the schedule she described. She smelled like perfume she didn't usually wear. Her lipstick was smudged. She tossed her heels aside and sighed dramatically, like she'd carried the weight of the world on her shoulders instead of spending her day smiling at open houses. "Rough day?" I asked calmly. She blinked, surprised I was still awake. "Clients," she said. "Always clients." I nodded slowly, hiding everything running through my mind. She had no idea the ground was shifting beneath her. No idea the blue-collar husband she paraded around as an accessory wasn't as harmless as she believed. And I wasn't about to enlighten her. Not yet. Instead, I watched her move around the kitchen, humming, texting someone, smiling at her screen. And I felt something colder than anger. Clarity. I didn't confront her. Didn't ask questions. Didn't accuse. That wasn't my style. Not anymore. I simply said, I'll be having some important conversations this week. Business stuff. She barely looked up. Sure, babe. Whatever you need. Whatever I need. She had no idea how true that was. And I had no intention of warning her. Not when the quiet man finally realized something. Silence isn't weakness. It's preparation. Monday came with a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in a long time. The kind of morning where the air feels different, heavier, like the first second before a storm breaks. Lauren left early, more dressed up than usual, hair curled, heels sharper, perfume stronger. She claimed she had a strategic meeting with her team. I knew better than to ask questions. I just watched her walk out the door like a woman who believed her world was safe, untouched, invincible. Meanwhile, I drove straight to my office and began the kind of work no one teaches you. Not construction, not contracting, not blueprints. Strategy. Surprising people think men like me don't know how to strategize. They forget building anything, homes, businesses, lives, requires more intelligence than they give us credit for. My first call was to Kensington Homes. I set a meeting for that afternoon. My second call was to Willowgate Development. Another meeting, same day. North River, same thing. I cleared my entire schedule. By noon, I'd lined up 3 critical conversations, one after another, each with stakeholders who carried more weight in Lauren's industry than she ever had. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with a text from her. Big day? Wish me luck. I stared at it for a moment, wondering whether she genuinely believed I was still the same blind, grateful husband who quietly stood in the corners of her fancy events. But I didn't reply. Not out of anger. Out of focus. I arrived at the first meeting in a steady, deliberate calm. Kensington's project director, a no-nonsense man named Harold, looked relieved the moment I walked in. Mark, he said, shaking my hand like he held on for dear life. We're counting on you for this launch. Marketing needs an updated timeline. Carter told us you'd be flexible. Did he? I said, yes. He said you're easygoing. His words. That almost made me laugh. Easygoing. Translation, someone Carter thought was below him. Someone who'd roll over when asked. Someone who wouldn't dare slow down a multi-million-dollar campaign. Harold, I said, keeping my voice even, my firm will support the launch. But I need full visibility. I need to know exactly who is representing this development on the realtor's side. Harold blinked. It's being headed by Carter Reeves. Your wife is on the project too. I'm aware. He cleared his throat, sensing something he couldn't quite name. Is that a problem? It becomes a problem, I said carefully, when certain people underestimate the importance of my company's role. Harold nodded slowly, understanding more than I stated. Consider us fully transparent going forward, he said. If you need anything, anything at all, you contact me directly. Perfect. The Willowgate meeting went even smoother. Their director was sharper, more numbers-driven, the kind of guy who valued results over people. When I mentioned adjusting construction phases and requiring direct sign-offs rather than going through realtor channels, he didn't even argue. He just said, if it protects our timeline, do whatever you need. North River was the wild card. Younger leadership, more erratic, more easily influenced by flashy talkers like Carter. But even they straightened up when I showed them projections, actual numbers, demonstrating how slowing construction by 6 weeks could derail the high-end spring market. They paled. They listened. They agreed to everything I outlined. And just like that, the balance of power shifted. Not abruptly, not loudly, quietly, precisely, like tightening a bolt one turn at a time. By late afternoon, I'd set parameters for every contractor milestone, every inspection approval, every vendor timeline. All roads, absolutely all of them, now led through me. And I didn't tell Lauren a word of it. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. She'd spent too long letting other people define me. Too long letting Carter talk like I was some oversized lawn ornament she kept around to make the house look respectable. She'd forgotten I was the one who'd put us in that house to begin with. But life has a way of reminding people who they're dealing with. When I got home, she was sitting at the kitchen island, swirling wine in a glass like she was in a commercial. The moment she saw me, she brightened. "You won't believe the day I had," she said. "Things are finally happening for me." Carter thinks a lot of things," I said, hanging up my jacket. She blinked at the tone. "I was going to tell you about the opportunity. I'm sure you were." She stared at me, confused, maybe even a little irritated. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "Busy day?" "Meetings. Big ones." She tilted her head like she was evaluating me, like she thought she knew everything about me, like she assumed I'd report to her. "Anything important?" she asked lightly. "Everything," I said. Just that one word. "Everything." She frowned, sensing something she couldn't name, something shifting. But she didn't press. She never did when it came to my work. That was her mistake. That night, she slipped into bed earlier than usual, humming to herself, probably replaying her glamorous visions of the future. But I sat awake in the living room long after, thinking, planning, clarifying. And in that quiet space, I realized something. Power doesn't come from noise. It comes from knowledge, from position, from timing. And I finally understood just how much of that I actually had. The next morning felt like the world had changed its angle, just slightly, like everything had tilted in a direction only I could sense. I woke up before dawn, not because of stress, but because something inside me had finally unclenched. Lauren was still asleep, curled under the duvet, breathing evenly, without the faintest idea of how many lines had shifted beneath her feet since the gala. I watched her for a moment, not out of affection, but out of clarity. Sometimes the last view of something tells you more than all the years that came before it. I left the house quietly and headed straight to my office. I had 3 project managers waiting on updates, a dozen subcontractors needing direction, and a handful of developers wanting confirmation that everything was on schedule. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was the man Carter joked about, the man Lauren dismissed, the man their friends laughed at. Yet all those polished people depended on the work of my hands to keep their own futures intact. Around 11, my assistant knocked on my door. "Mark," she said hesitantly, "your wife is here." I nodded. "Tell her I'm unavailable." She swallowed. She said she'll wait. Then she'll wait. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't rush. Didn't explain. Quiet men don't need explanations when they finally understand their worth. An hour later, I stepped out of my office. Lauren shot up from the lobby chair, eyes wide, makeup perfect, desperation neatly hidden under foundation and mascara. "We need to talk," she said. I studied her for a long moment. "Do we?" Her expression broke just a little, the smallest crack. "Mark, something's happening with the project. Developers are delaying decisions. No one will give me a straight answer. Carter's furious, my team's panicking, and people keep saying timelines changed without anyone telling us why." I nodded slowly. "That tends to happen in business." She stared at me, searching my face. "Did you do something?" "I conducted my business," I said. "Just like you conduct yours." "But why didn't you tell me?" I met her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me when people were laughing at me right next to you?" That hit her. Hard. Her breath caught. Her posture stiffened, and a flush crept up her neck. "That was a stupid joke," she said. "People laughed because it was the atmosphere, the alcohol. Carter was trying to lighten the mood. He was mocking me." I corrected calmly. "And you let him." She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "I didn't want to make a scene." "And neither did I said. "So I made decisions instead." Something in her expression shifted then. Fear, realization, something she hadn't felt in years. "Mark, whatever's happening, it's ruining everything I've built." I didn't respond. Because the truth was simple. Anything built on disrespect was already broken. She stepped closer. "Can we fix this? Together?" "No," I said quietly. "No anger. No heat. Just truth." She blinked rapidly. "You're serious?" "I am." A long silence followed. the kind that makes two people understand the finality of a moment. Then she whispered, "You're not the man I thought you were." I almost laughed. "No, I'm the man you forgot I was." I walked past her, heading for the exit. She followed, voice trembling. "Mark, please, I'm begging you. Tell me what you want." I stopped at the doorway, turned back, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight lift completely. "Respect," I said. And since I didn't get it, I took back the only thing I could control, myself. She didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't speak. She just stood there, watching everything she'd taken for granted slip out of her hands. I left the building without looking back. That afternoon, I finalized the last piece of business that needed my signature. Developers would move forward on their timelines, on my terms. My firm would continue its work without bending to people who spoke down to me. And whatever happened in Lauren's world from that point on, well, that was her responsibility, not mine. That evening, as I sat in my new place, quiet, clean, simple, I realized something I should have seen years ago. A man doesn't lose himself all at once. He loses himself in small concessions, in unspoken hurts, in jokes he swallows, in disrespect he tolerates, piece by piece, until one day, something snaps back into place, and he remembers who he is. For me, that moment wasn't dramatic. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't a scene. It was a decision made in silence. And silence, when used by the right man at the right time, can shake the ground harder than any shout. So if you've been here through this entire story, thank you. And if you want more stories where quiet men rise, where the underestimated become unforgettable, make sure you subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment. Your support means everything.